So can we go right back to the beginning?
Yes.
What role did radio play in sort of your early years? What do you remember of like your early days listening to the radio?
Early days in Canada.
Well, you could tell me like what were the early days in Jamaica like when we were listening to the radio?
So let's see. I was there till I was 10. So strangely enough, you'd think radio would be consumed by reggae music all the time when you're not from Jamaica, but Jamaicans are really into all kinds of music. Pop music, soul, R&B. So back on the radio, I used to listen to a lot of that, actually, because you could hear the local reggae music from the sound systems. You didn't need the radio for that. Every day, the music was just pounding and pounding from different blocks, right? But then when it came to the radio, which was, a lot of AM radio and FM, we'd be able to tune in to the American stations from maybe Florida or just the southern part of the U.S. They would leak into Jamaica. So you'd hear stuff like, the Beatles and the Temptations, some Elvis Presley. I remember hearing, just memorable songs that are more poppy and almost rocky, but not necessarily urban or black at that time. We didn't have a sense of, belief in our own Jamaican music at the time, so it was still kind of suppressed in the underground, so you didn't hear a lot of that on the radio.
So then when you go to Canada and you're 10 when you moved to Canada, right? Mm-hmm. Like what's the experience like then? Because I have to imagine there's not a black-owned radio station at that point either.
No such thing.
No. So you wouldn't have heard of that, and you also wouldn't have the sound systems. You wouldn't have had the opportunity to hear reggae and dance hall coming from that in Toronto as well. Like, what was your experience of listening to the radio in Canada when you got here?
Well, when I got here, it was like 1972, 73. And strangely enough, as a Jamaican who loves music, not just one kind of music, I was like a kid in a candy store. It was like Canada represented to be a melting pot of all different kinds of music, which I was so happy just to get away from listening to reggae all the time, because my uncle was a reggae DJ, so I had the sound system in my house, right? So I'd wake up to it and go to bed to it every day. So when I came here, it was like a discovery of a whole bunch of different kinds of music. And I used to listen to 1050 Chum and 680, which was like, I think, CFTR at the time. And I'd look forward to like the top 100 countdowns at the end of the year, and it would be mostly rock and pop music, Caucasian music, white people's music, hardly any black music leaking into the top 100. I'd been, one song maybe out of the top 100 would be black artists, but it didn't matter to me. I quickly got absorbed. You got to understand, when I went to school, in 72, 73, you were like the only black kid in your public school, maybe one of 4 black people in your junior high school.
You were.
And then, yes, and other people in my position in that year in the Toronto area, right?
Yeah.
So it represented the market for consumption at the time. If there wasn't a demand for it, then people would feel no way about being obligated to produce it. But as years went by, the Jamaican, West Indian black population in the whole metropolis kept growing and growing, and with that came a greater demand to give us the music that we like, that we want.
But that being said, I heard a story about you that you started like a DIY radio station when you were in high school. Is that
Absolutely,
right? Can you tell me that?
Yes. Well, being a music enthusiast and a DJ at the time, I had a Fantastic Boys DJ service, so we did high school dances.
This is before, like, when you were in high school, didn't you start a radio station? Was that?
Yes. Yeah. So this was grade 12 and grade 13.
Okay.
And Victoria Park High School. So we had this spot called the Cafe, the Jet Fac, where I took theater arts. So it was like a nice room like this, with lights and this upper booth that had glass, and you could look down on this area. And to me, it seemed like, a great opportunity to put a mock radio station in it. All my friends at this time were into music. Like, we're a very musical culture at that time.
Yeah.
People were into their new wave, their pop, a little bit of reggae, a little bit of this. But I thought, all these guys are so talented. Maybe I could talk the school into having a mock radio station operate from that same facility. And they said, okay. So all it took was moving in a pair of turntables, an amplifier, and lots of speaker wires running all the way down from one end of the school to the other into the cafeteria. And then there we would mount some big speakers in the caf. So every morning, every lunch, after school, we'd have these same guys, these, musical geniuses, play DJs and pipe the music into the cafeteria. And it's probably what got me into Ryerson, actually, because in my interview, that came up, and I think they were very impressed that I had the ambition to do that. But yeah, it was my first little taste of what was to come.
So then how does Fantastic Voyage start? Because that was on 88.1 FM. That's the Ryerson. At the time, that was the Ryerson radio station, right?
Yeah, it was called something else in 83 first. I forget the name of it.
The name of the show wasn't Fantastic Voyage?
No. So the name of my disc jockey service in grade 13 and 12 was Fantastic Voyage Disc Jockey Service. But when I first went to Ryerson, the station was not interested in black music. They were very new wave and punk and on the ground. But because I was a first-year student there, I did get a job there. But I was under pressure to play music that I didn't identify with, right?
Right,
and
they wanted you to play pop
sneak in
and
my
rock
own little funk and, early Grandmaster Flash and stuff like that.
Wow.
So after a while, it didn't work. They let me go because I didn't fit the programming schedule. But I kept knocking on the doors, wanting a show there in any way, shape, or form. And one day, it was John Jones and Anthony Leo, the program director, station manager. They called me and said, Ron, you can have a show now, and you can play the music you want. And that was a turning point. That's when I gave it a title, the Fantastic Voyage program. So that was late 1983, because I was there at Ryerson from 83 to 85. And that was when the show started and eventually transformed from being a show that played funk and rap, because this was before the term hip-hop became commercialized. Yeah. And then it later became the hip-hop show that it was, maybe Canada's first hip-hop radio show.
When did hip-hop start getting into the mix? Like
next year is supposed to be the 50th anniversary of hip-hop, right? So it's in your head, really. But 1979, it was rap. That's when Rapper's Delight came out, right? Yeah. And then as years went on, I would say by around 1983, 84 at the latest, that's when the term hip-hop became popularized and we understood what we had.
Was it hard to get the records?
From a living in Toronto point of view, yes.
Yeah, was it hard to get those early Grandmaster Flash
It's American
records?
culture, yeah. It was hard in the sense that if you weren't there on the scene, on the edge at the time, then you were not in the record stores every weekend when the records were imported. So I was always in the record stores. I'd literally be there when they're putting the records on the shelves. And in that stage, you buy everything. You don't even listen to the record. As soon as you see the label and it's from New York and it has any kind of a credible artist that you've heard of but you've never seen, you only dream of, you buy those records as an early DJ. And you end up playing those records twice sometimes because at this stage, there's not enough rap music to buy in Toronto. So phase 2 now is you have to go to New York. You have to dig into the crates in those record stores that you've heard of that are, hidden in Brooklyn or, like in some crazy place in another territory of New York, and you have to spend hours there, and you don't even know what you're buying sometimes, but you're in a space where there's other DJs who do the same thing. They spend time and they're looking through the crates. And I remember there's one song that Sunshine Sound used to play called We Come to Take Control. Yeah. And that was the hardest record for any DJ to find in Canada. And I was the happiest kid when I looked through the crates and I'm like, wow, look at this. Amazing. It was like a glory moment.
So you were going to New York to find these records too? Like you were traveling
Absolutely.
there?
Yeah. I went to every record store and went to New York several times to buy records, and...
You took it really seriously.
You didn't know you took it seriously. You were doing what you loved, right? Being a DJ was amazing at the time. It was, you played over big sound systems. It's not like now where, everybody's a DJ now. But back then, to be a DJ who was kind of, pushing black music the way it deserved to be pushed was a special thing. And if you were supposed to be there, then you didn't know it was work when it came to going and getting records and just being on the edge and being at the jams and understanding culture and just wanting more and more of it all the time. It was a beautiful time. That's why we called it the golden era, man. There's nothing else that's come along like it since.